Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. 40-something gamers, me and my best friend, Sharon.
Yo,
We happen to be 40-something years old, and we like playing video games. I mean, that's what the link was when we back in the 90s when we first met. A few things that connected us: music, Michael Jackson, and of course, video games. And if you listen to last episode, man, we talked about Shredder's Revenge, and we also talked about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection. And now, if you listen to the end of the episode, we were talking about a game that, man, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, it was better than the arcade. And matter of fact, I don't even remember playing the arcade, but they have a collection, and we're just going back on our collection series. We're going to talk about the Contra collection. And man, one thing I will say, man, is like with Contra, man, I remember it's one of those games like with Super Mario for the Nintendo. I remember exactly where I was when I first saw Contra on the NES, and that dun, 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 dun. And also what's crazy is there's a code that everybody you know, up, down, down, left, right.
yeah,
So we're back on the series. We're going to talk about the Contra series, the Contra collection series. But I want to ask you, man, Sharon, where were you, man, when you first played Contra, man? Do you remember that moment?
oh yeah, man. The first time I played Contra, it was I want to say about 1988, 1989. I was in the fifth grade. I do know for a fact because we had just got Nintendo. And I had one of my boys, he had the game Contra, and he brought it down to the house. And that was basically the first game I want to say I played outside of Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. It was Contra. It was somewhere between that one and Super Mario 2. But yeah, I remember I was in my bedroom and I asked my grandma, I was like, hey, yo, can we go back in the back and play this game? And she kind of sighed for a minute. She was like, you know what? Yeah, that's fine. And man, that's when I played it. And I was just like, wow, this game is cool. We used to rent it all the time, you know. Yeah, we had a lot of memories with this game. I would even play it like in the morning times, like before school. You know, we knew the bus was coming on like 30 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm gonna play this game for a few more minutes before I have to take it back today. But yeah, that was a lot with that one right there.
Man, I remember, the Contra collection. I remember like exactly where I was, man, and I couldn't believe it. Like Super Mario was dope. I mean, Super Mario that was it. That solidified Nintendo. But Contra, at that time when it came out, the graphics, I hadn't even heard of the arcade game until I saw the Nintendo series. And even like, it's just the Nintendo series was better, man. So with the Contra collection series, they have Contra, they have Super, what was it was it Super C? For
Super C.
Yeah, Super C for the Nintendo, the second one.
Yeah.
They have Contra Hard Corps. They have Super Contra.
The Alien Wars, Contra 3.
They have the Alien Wars, yeah, and they have Contra 3.
Yeah.
And man.
I think there was Operation C also.
Yeah, Operation C as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, man, just like I said, like with the Nintendo one, I wasn't let down. And they even made it longer because you brought up a good point, and I didn't realize until I played the series, was the Contra itself on the arcade game was shorter.
Yeah,
Contra on the Nintendo was
like 7 to 8 minutes.
Yeah, the Nintendo version, man. Woo! And also, man, I would like to know, my question to you is, have you ever beat that game without the code?
I have. The first one?
Okay.
Yeah, I had that. I mean, back in the day when I used to practice a lot, well, I had to actually walk through that game maybe once or twice. But I had definitely done it. And I think that once I got past that energy stage, energy zone, where it would like blast out those lasers.
Yeah.
I was pretty much home free. That to me was the hardest stage out of all of that.
Yeah.
Because I mean the way those things would just like randomly blast out. But I can honestly say I did go through the game with just 3 lives. But you know, a lot of times, like once you got so many points, like on Pac-Man, you would get an extra life. So that was also a big help.
Yeah. And then also like I remember just like man, it's one of those games like it goes up there like with Mario,
Yeah.
Zelda, Castlevania. And then
Hmm.
I want to list off the games in the Contra Anniversary Collection. So we Contra the Arcade,
Right.
Super Contra the Arcade,
Hmm.
Contra for the Nintendo. Contra, it has a Japan version. It has Super C, which is Super Contra for the Nintendo. They have Contra 3, the Alien Wars.
Hmm.
Operation C. I want to say that was for the Game Boy.
It
Uh,
was. Yeah.
Contra Hard Corps,
Yeah.
and that game is hard as hell for the Genesis.
Right.
Super Protector Alien Rebels. I know in certain countries they had them as robots.
I wonder why they did that though.
We used to have our video games were heavily the content was heavily edited or
Right.
censored.
And we didn't even know it back then.
No, we didn't even know it, and which is
Yeah, we
crazy
just
because there was no blood. You know, you just shot them and they blew up.
right. No blood at all.
Yeah. So out of that whole series, man, which what would you rank, man? What is your favorite and what is your least favorite?
I gotta say, my favorite would be I played Contra 3 the most with the Super Nintendo. I really did enjoy Contra, which is a lot of fun. But I like the 16-bit era, so I'm gonna have to go with Contra 3 being my favorite. My least favorite, uh, it's probably gonna have to be Hardcore because it's so difficult, you know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and the crazy thing is, man, because you remember back, so the Genesis was a older, much older system. So
Yeah,
one thing that the Super Nintendo had over, I mean, they had more colors,
yeah.
they had more sprites. Um, they also had this mode 7.
Hmm.
So that was the big thing behind Mario Kart. That was the big thing behind F Zero. That was the big thing behind Pilot Wings.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I will say my most favorite is of course the Contra. I didn't own Contra, but I was impressed with Contra. I borrowed Contra a lot, and then also it took me a while to get a 16-bit system,
Right.
so I held on. So along with Mega Man, I think it was Mega Man 3,
Yeah.
Mega Man 3, and then also I had Super C.
Yeah.
So Super C in my mind was like, yo, this is damn near 16-bit. Until now, I was like, hey, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I want to say like I'm impressed with hardcore. I'm impressed with the graphics.
Yeah. Oh, it was
Um,
really good. It's just really hard.
like for the Sega Genesis, man, it pushed in my mind. It pushed the Sega Genesis to the limits.
Yeah.
However, it's hard as crap. I wonder if the same cheat code works on that because even now, man, I don't play hardcore not that long, and I even played the Super Nintendo version.
Yeah.
The Super Nintendo version is a lot easier, but hardcore, I can't even get past the first stage. But I will say I am impressed. So I guess my order is Contra, Super C for the Nintendo, and then hardcore. Like I'm Team Sega all the way. But I
Yeah.
will say the Super Nintendo version is very nice.
Yeah.
Um,
I
never,
will honestly say though, with hardcore, I did get about 4 or 5 stages in,
mhm,
but I mean, that's about as far as I got.
yeah,
Yeah. But I say with Contra 3, I don't know if there's a code for it, but I mean, I just beat the game. You know,
yeah,
I just set it to like the maximum lives. Now I've never actually played it on the most. I never finished it on the most difficult level because I've never been able to do that. But I have finished it like on easy and normal, which is difficult enough if you ask me.
yeah,
But if you put it on a more difficult level, you get a different you get like you have to fight the boss again at the end. Like he becomes more difficult.
wow,
Yeah, so I mean it chases you up the screen and you still have to fight versus when you just blow him up on easy and normal, he's done.
yeah, yeah. And I will say like, and a question I have for you because even with this series, like I said, I never really invested that much time in the arcade. I seen it, but which is impressive
Yeah.
even back then. Like the Nintendo version, I think everybody remembers the Nintendo version. I don't know too many people that be like, hey man, I was at the arcade with this. But back then, did you ever invest any time in the arcade or plan the arcade version at all?
The arcade version of Contra.
Yeah, Contra.
We had, like in the movie theater in Waverly, I remember like this is kind of go back probably about 19 whenever that movie Pet Cemetery came out.
Yeah.
And we were in a movie theater, and I had already played the arcade version of Contra. I'm sorry, the Nintendo version of Contra. And I happened to be over there, and they had an arcade version of Contra. And I was like, oh, cool. So I put a card in, and I didn't make it past the first stage. I was like, okay. It's like, I'm gonna stick with the Nintendo, because this game is like, it's the same game, but it's different. It's a little. It moves a little different. It moves a little quirkier.
And they flip funny to me, man. I'm like, you guys flip funny, in the arcade.
Yeah, they move slower. So when you play Nintendo, you're used to that speed. So when you think you're gonna walk to the arcade, and that's just like Turtles in Time, the same way. You think you're gonna walk through it because you can walk through the Super Nintendo version. It's not like that.
No. And then even I didn't notice like the second stage, where you're walking, it's kind of like 3D, and that's even impressive, man.
Yeah,
that Nintendo pulled that off at that time. Like I will say that game is ahead of its time.
Yeah, and it's still playable today.
Yeah, because there's Nintendo games that didn't reach that magnitude of, and we already got a preview like, yo. And then to be honest with you, that was one of the first series of games that was released with the classic Zelda, Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Mm-hmm. So that already set the bar. And like even thinking in retrospect, but I was gonna say with the arcade, I didn't realize you had a choice. You could either go left or right.
Yeah.
And then up. But that wasn't the option on the Nintendo. You just kept moving
forward.
Yeah, you kept moving forward. So even when I was playing the arcade version of this series, I'm like, wait a minute, I gotta go left or right. And it's like I'm like, they even flip funny. It's unfamiliar territory for me. And I would like to say a kudos to Nintendo because they made an 8-bit game better than the 16-bit game. And that's I can't list off too many Nintendo games where I can honestly say the 8-bit was better than the 16-bit.
Double Dragon.
Okay, Double Dragon. Yeah, that's true.
Okay. I'm gonna say Double Dragon, not to get away from Contra. Double Dragon is one of my absolute favorite arcade games, particularly the second one. But I gotta say, the first one moved kind of sluggish, kind of slow, and it had a bunch of cheap hits in it. Whereas Double Dragon Nintendo, granted it was only one player at a time, it was faster, and there were no cheap hits, and it was a little bit more fun to me. But once I saw Double Dragon 2 in the arcade, I was like, oh wow. It was fast, it was better, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day.
Yeah.
But Contra was lit, and Nintendo did a really good job as to translating that game from the arcade, making it longer, giving it more playability, making it even playable to this day. I will still go and play Contra right now, and with no problem.
Because even now, like you have the arcade, you have the Nintendo version, you have the Sega Genesis version, and I'm playing the Nintendo version all day. Yeah. I'm not even looking at the arcade version. And you bring up a good point too. As the same as you pointed out with Double Dragon, the arcade was quirky, and that's the way I feel with Contra.
Right.
It's quirky.
Yeah.
It's quirky. And I feel like the Genesis and the Super Nintendo version, they didn't base it off of the arcade, they based it off of the Nintendo version.
Right.
With the playability. And then I wanna bring up something to you too, man.
What's that?
So also there was a Sega Genesis game ahead of that kind of was Contra-like, but it wasn't as good. You remember Midnight Resistance?
Yeah.
That reminds me of Contra, man. If you go back and look at
Midnight Resistance was awesome. Now I used to play that in the arcade a lot. We at our Walmart we had it, and I thought it was so neat because on the controller, like to make the character turn left and right, like to turn around, you can still move forward and backward. But if you rotated the controller, the joystick, whatever that thing is, he would turn around and he could attack the people in the back, and he'd still be moving forward.
Yeah.
I remember, and I do remember playing the Genesis version of Midnight Resistance also. Yeah. And you're right. That game did remind me a lot of Contra.
Contra. And then the Sega Genesis version, the music was better than that of the arcade. And then also when you let's think about the time period when Contra came out. You had Ikari Warriors, You had like all these shoot 'em ups, and then also what this reminded me of was the Predator, and then even the two characters remind me of Arnold and Sylvester Stallone.
I think that's who they were based on.
Yeah, it's hugely based off of the original Predators movie. So all the millennials, all you guys that dive deep into this game, you have to at least go back and watch Predator, and you get the references, and the game is spot on. The game is and at that time, Arnold was huge.
Yeah. So was Sly Stallone.
Yep. They were two big action guys, and one thing that I do appreciate, like the Cowabunga series, and like what they're doing now, is you're getting the whole package. Like I explained before, you either had to have a Nintendo or you had to have a Sega.
You had to have a shitload of quarters.
Yeah, a shitload of quarters, or you had to have a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, or a Sega Genesis. And let's be real, as I stated last episode, Konami didn't invest into Sega Genesis for a long time.
They really didn't.
Yeah, and I think Hard Corps is on the Sega Genesis Mini, right?
Yeah, it is. Hard Corps is on the Genesis Mini. Yeah, man, that Midnight Resistance, I remember that was the Data East game. Yeah, and I honestly, when I first saw that, I thought that Data East was going to be a whole different system. You know, I didn't realize that it was a company. I think they had also made RoboCop.
Yep. Oh yeah, they did make RoboCop. Data East did make RoboCop, and of course they made Bad Dudes.
Yes, that's another. We're gonna talk about that one next time too.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was my game also. That was my Double Dragon alternative.
Yeah.
That wasn't Double Dragon.
I just want to give cats a heads up for this Contra Anniversary Collection, man. Right now on Xbox, it's $3.99. So for $3.99, and then you also have to consider too, like as far as the memory, these games don't take that much memory, man.
It's just $3.99.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a deal.
Yeah,
you know what? I have it on my PlayStation 4, but if it's $3.99, I think I might take and put it on my Nintendo Switch also, because that's a really good price.
Yeah. So now, I mean, you can get this right now, and and guys that have played it and guys that have been fans of Contra, let us know what you think, man, and let us know what is your favorite Contra game in the series. Unfortunately, I was Team Sega till the end.
Yeah.
So I really didn't get to play. And the one thing I like about this is I get to go back to play the arcades, go back and play the Nintendo version, the one that I fell in love with, also the Super Nintendo version, and also the Sega Genesis version. And then the cool thing too is you also get to see the Game Boy version.
Right.
And you get to see the Game Boy version, and you get to see just all the versions. And I'm like I said, like the arcade versions are foreign to me. I'm going Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. And I think out of all of them, which one do you think is the better? Oh, you probably already answered that, between the Sega Genesis version and the Super Nintendo version.
I'm gonna say this though: the Sega Genesis version is not bad. It's just difficult. I think the Super Nintendo version, it's really two sides of the same coin. Because I'm gonna say the Super Nintendo version is good. The Sega Genesis version is good. It's just difficult. Or maybe I just have to learn how to play it a little bit better. That's a hard question. But I have the most play time with the Super Nintendo version. So, granted, I was Team Nintendo. I was also Team Sega. I wasn't opposed to it. I just wasn't good at it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's hard as hell.
Yeah.
And I you know what? Now looking research, there's gotta be a cheat code. There's gotta be something. There ain't no way in hell that game is that hard. And
well, actually, there is a way that I learned to kind of cheat on that game, because that if you pay attention to what you're doing, you can save your progress in that game. So what I would do, and I did this with Zelda, I did this with Ninja Gaiden. I like this, like once I get so far into the game, I like to save my progress. That way, if I die, I just restart where I saved and I just keep going. Yeah, so it's like they've kind of made it to where you can kind of do that, because they know these games are difficult, especially that game. And even with my saving and restarting, I still die. But like if you pay attention to what you're doing, you can do that. And you just kind of save. It's like you kind of learn like the boss or whatever the pattern is, and like when they wipe you out, you just move a little further, you save a little bit more. So you just kind of keep doing until you figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I got a question for you then. Because I know you're Team Sega. I'm Team Nintendo. What year did you get a Genesis?
Man, I got a Genesis. I got a Genesis in like I want to say 91. I got it right after
Sonic.
yeah, so it's like 91, 92. Yeah, Sonic came out, Streets of Rage came out.
Yeah.
So I want to say like towards the end of 91. That's when I got a Sega Genesis.
So did your Sega Genesis come with like Altered Beast or Sonic or Street Rage?
It came with Sonic the Hedgehog. So I got it with
Okay.
Sonic the Hedgehog, and then my dad bought me Moonwalker. So that was my first two games. And actually, as we're talking, man, I see they got a Capcom beat 'em up bundle
Yeah.
for $9.99. I'm about to get that bad boy.
Snatch it. Snatch it up. But yeah, so you got a Sega Genesis. I got mine late. I'm sorry. I got my Super Nintendo in 1992.
Okay.
I always wanted a Sega Genesis, man. I remember when Burger King, they used to like promote Sega Genesis. It's like you could win one. I was like, oh man. And I was getting strategy guides before we had the system and everything. And I wound up getting a Super Nintendo, which I was still really happy with because everybody else around me was getting a Sega Genesis.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, okay, it's like he has this, y'all have these systems, but I have this system. So it's like, if we wanted to play Sega, we went to this guy's house. But if you wanted to play Super Nintendo, everybody came to my house, and then everybody started getting them. And then a couple of years later, I had to jump up to the PlayStation, which is another story for another day. You know about it.
Yeah. And the thing is, man, it's like, as with anything, the later systems always came with a little bit